Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Welcome everybody to today's webinar, What is Islamic Finance? Making it a Sustainable Reality. In this two-part webinar, part one would be presented by Rafi-uddin Shikoh, who leads the development at Dinar Standard, a marketing services, research and business media firm that specializes in emerging Muslim markets. Since 2008, Rafi has been advising companies on market expansion, investments, and marketing strategy in the halal and Islamic finance markets. Rafi has presented Dinar Standard's pioneering insights at Oxford, Harvard, IIUM Malaysia, and several other prominent universities.
Okay, so my objective would be here to present for about 45 minutes. I'll try to actually keep it shorter than that, so we have a lot more time for Q&A. The key takeaways I would hope that you get out of this time you're investing with us is, inshallah, we would like you to have a decent perspective of what is microfinance, and first of all, in the context of global microfinance space. It is very important for us to have a good purview of the general global microfinance space. So I would be providing a about 15-20 minutes overview of the key drivers of global microfinance, why, what are the opportunities today, how are the models working today, what are the success stories, what does the landscape look like today in terms of the key players and the regional impact or regional reach of microfinance globally, and then the challenges and problems that the industry globally is facing. Next, the next part of the session, which again I'll spend another 15-20 or about 20-25 minutes on, will be the core topic of today, which is the Islamic part of microfinance, as in what is, once we have a context of the global microfinance and conventional microfinance in general, what is Islamic microfinance? I would hopefully be able to give you some perspectives on the key models around Islamic microfinance today. We will talk a little bit about the current landscape, given that this space or Islamic microfinance is in much an infancy, even though the global microfinance, we could say, is also in its infancy in many ways, but Islamic finance is definitely in its earlier days relative to even global microfinance. So we'll look at that, and then we'll inshallah wrap up with looking at a few examples of the of success stories, as well as some of the challenges that the Islamic microfinance players are facing today. So that's essentially the objective of my presentation today, and after that we will open up and hopefully have a reasonable conversation and hopefully be able to answer any questions. So so before I go into the details and cover the whole two big topics that I discussed that would be part of the agenda, I think it would be perhaps valuable to just kind of summarize the gist of this whole presentation. So if you tune out or if you check out in the middle, inshallah, at least you'll get the main theme or the main ideas that this whole presentation will be delivering. So in that context, to begin with the summary, essentially from what is microfinance, in summary, it is banking for the poor. It is part of finance, an emerging space of finance that's serving the huge number of unbanked people, lower income or poor people around the world, which, as you can imagine, from a number and volume point of view, are huge. So this is a space where commercial banks and others are not serving or not or not addressing, but microfinance is starting to have an impact. The need is big. That is indeed the case, and you will see through the presentation I make. We'll look at the current demand aspect of microfinance and its practicality. However, the envisioned the banner that the industry is talked much about, which is it being the silver bullet toward poverty alleviation, seems certainly for us too big a promise. The industry is growing, but it is also showing signs of growing pains, And there are signs of problems, primarily around excess lending issues or related aggressive collection issues, much akin to the subprime mortgage lending. So we're seeing that dynamic today. However, many success stories do exist, and that's what makes the case, the reality. It's driven much by the need that exists in terms of the unbanked population globally and the lower income populations globally. And so even with the issues and challenges, best practices are developing and are growing, and we're seeing and we expect that those problems that exist today should get resolved. All of this is very relevant, and it's important why for the presentation I took this perspective, which is to talk first about microfinance in general, because we see the inherent drivers or inherent target audience is something that's very close to what Islamic microfinance would be all about. So finally, in terms of Islamic finance, as I mentioned in the introduction, it's in its infancy, and it is making, or it has a strong promise of making finance accessible to many low-income Muslims specifically, and it also, with its model, has universal potential. But we are certainly in an infancy, and it's certainly an exciting area. So you know, this is basically the summary of the presentation. We'll kind of go through each point in terms of the reality of each aspect of this. So let's dive into it. All right. So as I'd mentioned to start, in terms of the what is microfinance in general, or we're going to begin with what is driving global microfinance. So there are two big drivers, as I've structured this to show. First is microfinance is addressing the financial exclusion of low-income global population. According to a report by CGAP, and this is a organization you will see me referring to throughout the presentation. It's the Consultative Group to Assist the Poor, a research and policy think tank been put together by many, over 25 multilateral organizations, and it's housed with the World Bank, and they essentially are providing the most comprehensive and deep perspective on the microfinance space. So according to them, approximately 49% of adults today have deposit accounts in formal financial institutions. So what it means, about half of the world of adults around the globe globally are unbanked or do not have formal engagement with any financial institution. As you can expect, the more relevant and more interesting aspect of this is the fact that within developing world, approximately 72% of adults do not have bank accounts. So obviously, when we think about the context as this is going to lead to, which is the Muslim majority countries or its relevance to Islamic finance, as you can imagine, many of these developing markets are Muslim majority countries. And as you see in this chart, again from the report from CGAP and World Bank from 2010, you can see the banked percentage of banked households in sub-Saharan Africa, for example, is 12%, in South Asia is 22%, versus high-income OECD countries, it's 91%. So again, it shows there's a huge gap in terms of the unbanked population. Again, in that similar context, CGAP also did a Islamic microfinance note in 2008, and they estimated that 72% of people living in Muslim majority countries do not use formal financial services. So that is obviously a large number of population. The second aspect of what's driving microfinance is the need of micro enterprises. These are small enterprises that have historically lacked access to financial products and services. And today we're seeing microfinance institutions are structuring themselves, or are structured by definition in a way to be able to serve smallest of these enterprises, while commercial banks and other mainstream financial institutions have typically concentrated on large corporations or just are not structured to engage with micro enterprises. This chart here is from a report by World Bank uh, as part of the newsletter called Access Finance. It shows that in a typical emerging market, how does the corporate sector financing for businesses break down? And as you can see, approximately 65 to 75% of enterprises or businesses in an emerging market, according to this report, are usually micro enterprises. And these are not even SMEs or medium enterprises, but micro enterprises. So again, microfinance is a way to address this big, very fragmented, small enterprise space. So these are the two big drivers in terms of the need that is driving microfinance today. So just to conclude in terms of the drivers of global microfinance, as I said, those two things, within this report, they say that the unmet, in terms of sort of the, just to get an idea of the demand of it, the unmet demand for finance is large, but the exact number or even a rough but credible number has been hard to pin down. And there have been various other studies and estimates that have been ranging from 500 million people to 3 billion people in terms of the opportunity to address through microfinance. And we will talk about, later talk about the existing market penetration relative to the potential in the next few slides. Okay, so with this context of what are the drivers for microfinance, let's look into what is microfinance. Today, microfinance services are essentially designed to serve low-income groups. And microfinance institutions have even further segmented the low-income groups into extreme poor or moderately poor, and depending on different market, different region of the world, the definition of what is moderately poor or extremely poor varies. However, in general, we see that the microfinance services are serving more than moderately poor in terms of the segment between low income, and mostly. And these are the population groups that are mostly not served by commercial banks today. In terms of products and services, it's very important, I think, I'm sure many of you are experts in this space or have good understanding, but for those of you who this is your initial introduction to microfinance or Islamic microfinance, we sometimes perceive microfinance to just be about credit facilities or loans. But if you can think about the needs of those two groups that I've highlighted up here, the low-income population micro enterprises, they have this four broad category of needs. And today we're seeing the various microfinance institutions, both conventional and, as you'll see, even Islamic finance. These are the needs that they're trying to serve. And it is important, before we jump into, how is the contract for Islamic finance structured, or how are the different models, to really understand where is the need, what are the drivers in terms of this market that we're serving through microfinance. So, and with that in mind, and if you keep the low-income population in context, obviously savings is an area that if there is no option, very limited option, they are seeking, and we've seen they do use savings services. Insurance, as you can imagine, is sometimes for low-income people is even more important. So need in terms of insurance, obviously the most general area of need is credit. And then remittances or fund transfers. A lot of the low-income people sometimes are away from their homes or families, and they need to send money, and so or pay bills and all sorts of areas. So these are sort of the broad category of areas. There are investment products as well we see in microfinance, but these, I would say, are the main category of offerings and services. Now, beyond the need aspect and the general definition, let's get into what are some of the unique characteristics. Grameen Bank indeed had pioneered the group-based responsibility model, for which Grameen is so famously known for. Dr. Mohammed Yunus has been rewarded with the Nobel